One of the greatest things about being a storyteller, whether you're a self published author or a screenplay writer for Hollywood, is that you will never get a straightforward piece of writing advice. Like ever. From how to create a compelling character to how to build your story's setting, there are so many contradictions and lessons to the contrary of everything you know and love that it inevitably aggravates your borderline personality disorder, sends you back to Dr. Insani's therapy lounge, and makes you wonder if storytelling is even something worth pursuing. No, hey wait, don't go anywhere. I need you to watch my stuff. That's why today we're going to look at a show that approaches storytelling from two opposing strategies: plot driven and character driven storytelling, so that you can better understand the contradictions in storytelling advice, pick and choose the rules that work best for your style of writing, and, most importantly, quit spending so much time and money at Dr. Insani's. So, without further ado, let's dive right into Arcane and explore how. No, hey, self, shut up. We can't just go straight into this. We have to actually teach or something first so that people don't get confused. And it's how we wrote this episode outline anyway. Fine, whatever. It's not like I haven't been doing this for a year or anything. Alright, so in a plot driven story, our focus has to do with a story's concept or flashy premise. People steal stuff out of dreams and taint your already complicated relationship with your father. People leave their MetaQuest realities to dodge bullets and fight Mark Zuckerberg. Some freaks team up to save the world from a jacked prune. There are a lot of explosions, cool effects, and your audience is highly invested in what is happening. Now, on the opposite end of the storytelling teeter-totter are our character-driven stories. Fewer things explode, and our audience's focus is invested in who the story is happening to, whether it's two boys talking through a fence, two men talking through a thicker fence, or a man trying to keep strangers off his property after cutting down his fence. But there is a problem with these definitions because they make it seem like action and character conflict happen in a vacuum. That if something explodes, I can't be invested in a character, or that if I'm invested in a character, nothing is going to explode. But, surprise, writing is an art form, which loosely translates to everything is made up and definitions don't matter. I think that's Scandinavian. In Arcane, things explode a lot, and I care about the characters, some more so than others. The variation in shiny scenes that make me say, wow, pretty colors, and oh my god, am I feeling something? Are what indicate whether a plot thread leans more towards a plot-driven story or a character-driven one. For example, plot threads like Jace, Echo, and Mel have characters with distinct drives, sympathetic backstories, and enough detail that we understand their personal struggles, and these struggles can be summarized neatly in a sentence or two. But it is because of these drives and struggles that the major machinery of the story's action takes place. Jace invents Hex Tech after meeting the Ghost of Christmas Future, which then rekindles the conflict between Topside and the Undercity. Mel wants Piltover to be a symbol of progress and peace, which then becomes an idol of contention between herself and Lady Kratos. Echo wanted to save his friends, and he remains relatively flat as a character, but he is who ultimately brings the whole story to a close. Each character has some depth, but their main function is to advance the stuff of the story. Make weapons, be related to a warmonger, make a time machine universe splitter. Yeah, we would watch each thread as a standalone story, and yeah, we would have some connection with these characters, but their emotional journey is not as memorable for our audience as Jinx or Vi. For both character threads, we have adequate fight scenes, explosions, and I was able to pick up some pointers for the next time I get catfished. I mean, hell, half of Jinx's scenes look like something out of Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and while some of their actions do serve to advance the major story, mainly just blowing up the council, their story is far more intimate relative to a character like Heimerdinger. The audience is less concerned with fire, drug hulks, and mass destruction during Vi and Jinx's scenes because more of the story's tension comes from their emotional conflict than their physical conflict. Vi struggles with guilt, love, and hypocrisy, which always seem to go hand in hand in my experience. Jinx struggles with forgiveness and her sense of identity. Sure, the world is blowing up around them, but I don't so much care about the world as I care about their relationship. I care about who is affected by the world getting burned down. We shift our audience's focus from the event to the people the event affects. In either case, realize that this is just a balancing act. If we have action without investment in a character, it's no different than watching the news. Oh, another war, another bombing, another flood. You don't really care. It's just numbers and pyrotechnics. If we have emotional investment in a character without any action, it's called the friend zone, and none of us need lessons on that.
But Andrews, what do I do after I've figured out which way my story leans? What do I focus on when I write my story?
Alright, guys, so I know this is a touchy subject for some of you, but it's just a reality when it comes to writing plot heavy stories. You're going to want to outline. Or don't, that's fine. If you hate yourself, and you're an artist, so you probably do. Write without any outlining. No plot points, no generalized objectives. Float through the ocean of your imagination until your pasty white inner child is sunburnt and hysterical because you accidentally landed on Repressed Memory Island. That's your prerogative, and I don't have the appropriate licenses to tell you otherwise. However, humor me for a moment and riddle this little ditty for me. How do you plan to accidentally wander your way through a coherent story about demigods, two enemy cities coming together to fight a common enemy, two sisters unliving their fuzzy dad, possessed by lawful evil Jesus, and time traveling hoverboarders making their way through parallel universes using the power of an unknown alphabet? Go on, I'll wait. Now look, I'm not questioning your genius, I'm just speaking up for your limited sanity. If you know that you're going to have a lot of moving parts, it makes sense to lay them all out before you, consider different ways of putting them together, and then maneuvering them around before busting out the soldering iron and crazy glue. Then, once you have a firm trajectory of your plot, look for the characters that best facilitate this trajectory. Who's the best character to demonstrate the negative effects of reckless ambition? Maybe a young ambitious man with something to prove and a hot politician to impress. Why would a warmonger come to Piltover, and how can we, as storytellers, make that conflict more emotional? Why don't we make the warmonger a direct relative of one of our characters? Oh, what if it's the hot politician we just came up with for that other guy? See how that works? Now, no, it's not quite that clean and easy in real life. Fitting characters into your plot driven story is a lot like building a puzzle without knowing what the puzzle is supposed to look like. You're just plugging away, little by little, until you can make out clearer and clearer details.
Well, then what's the alternative, Andrews? Because that first option sounds like there's a lot of crying involved.
Oh, but there is. Welcome to storytelling. Good storytelling, at least. If you're not crying while knuckles deep in a bag of unground espresso beans, you're not trying hard enough. That might be a Tolkien quote. Anyway, the alternative is to focus on your characters. Preferably just one, but if you like to juggle and hate yourself, throw in a couple. In my mind, character arcs are way easier to work with than plots. It's like building with Legos, or the sticks and bones of tiny animals that an owl pooped out in the woods. Great characters have a story to tell, whereas great plots don't always make the best characters. In Arcane, we have a girl who wants to save her sister, but also needs to let go of her guilt for punching her sister in the face. That is our story's spine and central nervous system. Boom. Wizardry. Biblio simplificus. We then add organs and stuff to our story by figuring out plot points as our hero unsuccessfully pursues her want. So, like, teaming up with a hot cop. Why is everyone in this story hot? Fighting a local drug lord, taking their resurrected father to rehab. These things all fail, our hero feels sad, but then ultimately she learns how to let go of her guilt metaphorically and her sister literally, causing her to grow as a person. Now look, Vi isn't the first character to ever feel regret or learn to let go of her mistakes. She's not the first character to feel conflicted between a love for her sister and love towards another character. But the plot of the story is what differentiates Vi in Arcane from Annie in Bridesmaids. Both characters learn a similar lesson, their growth as characters is very similar, but the events that teach them that lesson are way different, and so we get the same story with a completely different feel. The trick then, once we figure out how we want our stories to feel, is weaving them together while keeping them congruent. So Arcane does something pretty cool. They tell several overlapping stories where one story drives the action, one story drives the heart, and one story stitches them together, and I'm referring to the romance arc between Vi and Caitlin. This is subtle, easy to overlook, but super important to keep in mind for your own stories. Could Jace's story and Vi's story occur separately, only overlapping when Jinx sent a present to the council? Sure. But what happens when we exclude Caitlyn from the mix is that we lose emotional tension between the characters. Jinx calls the council meeting to an early close, yes, but the council and Vi don't overlap. They are two stories in vacuums that just happen to bump into each other. If you want to combine two stories, each with different characters but overlapping consequences, then look at strategies like B-plots in order to bring these two worlds together. These relationships can be between a mentor and apprentice, romantic interests, or enemies that become friends. The key is to have one character from storyline A and the other character from storyline B. They are the peanut butter that holds two slices of bread together. There's a lot less substance in these threads, but they add a lot of flavor and sophistication to a story, while also elevating the emotional stakes in an otherwise cut and dry dynamic between Piltover and Zahn. And look, while this is very cool and I am impressed with how the writers of Arcane got all of these stories to coincide with one another, there is a problem with having one, two, three, four, maybe 8 or more plots, is that it is hard to get your audience to care about 8 characters. If you're watching this channel for writing advice, more than likely you are working on your first novel or screenplay, which means that, as excited as you are to have finished your first story, you have all the time in the world to write it, and you can make it as long or as short as you want. For Arcane, with its plot-heavy story, its character-heavy story, its 6 other subplots, and the blade of Amazon's guillotine chopping it down to 2 seasons, the show is strapped for time to really develop any of its storylines. I'm not blaming anyone, Bezos. I'm just saying that if you are a free writer, meaning you don't have a boss to tell you what length your story needs to be, take your time. More storylines don't inherently make a better story. Longer stories don't inherently make a better story. Passion, excitement, energy, and most importantly, balance are the things that will make your story great. Woohoo! Been doing this for a year! Woo! The end.